Hi, I'm Jackie Tantillo, and this is Should Have Listened to My Mother. Are you who you are today because of or in spite of your mother? My guests and I talk about that regularly. The role your mom did or didn't play in your life. I've had many conversations with friends and guests who have had horrific relationships in their life, and I'm not just talking about soured relationships with their mother. It includes bad relationships with their dads, their lovers, their friends, etc. But they seem to all agree that it was because of those tough relationships that they learned more about themselves. In other words, those difficult or heartbreaking relationships were a gift. They learned who they were and or who they didn't want to be. So there is hope out there for all, especially if your mom didn't win the Mother of the Year award. Moms are just human, after all. There's no document that we sign before giving birth guaranteeing our devotion, commitment, and or expertise. And it doesn't mean that it won't be a rocky road ahead at times. It can definitely be complicated. Let's leave it at that. My guest, Amy L. Bernstein, is a former nonfiction writer, journalist, speechwriter, who's now concentrating on fiction, including mystery, romance, and young adult works. Her two most recent books, The Potrero Complex and The Nighthawkers, are available. And The Potrero Complex is available on Amazon and thebookshop.org, and The Nighthawkers is available on Amazon. My guest is also very active in her community in Baltimore, Maryland, where she takes pride in working with adults and teens with writers' workshops, grant writing programs, and more. Amy L. Bernstein, welcome to Should Have Listened to My Mother. It's a real pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you, Jackie. I am really glad to be here.
We actually, right before we started the interview, we found out that Amy and my sister both live in the exact same building in downtown Baltimore, Maryland. So talk about an icebreaker. That's a small, small world.
Small world.
So, Amy, you reached out to me and you said that you are the opposite of your mom. Was it a tumultuous relationship, or was it just like some light went off in your head at whatever age and said, I'm not doing this?
You know, as I was listening to your introduction, I was still asking myself these core questions. What was my relationship with my mother? And am I like her? Am I not like her? And I think where I've landed is that I'm like her in all the ways that I feel I cannot help but be like her, but I made very conscious choices to be very different. And I think it took me quite a while to realize that I was, in fact, running from who I thought she was, because I realized that's not who I needed to be.
Let's give she a name, your mom's name.
My mom is Gloria Felice.
Oh, wow. Is she Italian?
Not at all. Jewish as far back as you can go in history.
Gloria
But, you know,
Felice.
her parents, her first generation parents, her immigrant parents really wanted to use very American names. I don't know where the Gloria or the Felice came from, to be honest.
Wow. Okay. So you figured out there's stuff that's inevitable. What are some things that you realized you weren't going to change or didn't want to change? Do you know, have specifics in mind?
I think those are the things that I feel that I can't change. And of course, that's always up for debate right there, what we can change and what we can't change. But, you know, for example, there are temperament qualities. My mother was extremely introverted, and I am absolutely one of the most introverted members of my family. And I think I really did get that from her. And that's something, you know, that's just a characteristic about me that I can modulate it, and I do. But, you know, my mom was not about crowds and parties, and I'm not into that scene either. So that's one of the ways that I can't help but be like her.
It's so interesting. So you're an introvert. Well, I guess, or maybe it's very logical to others, but you chose to be active or alive in your print, in your words. as opposed to vocally. You put it down on paper. That sounds like a
Yes.
perfect relationship to me.
Exactly. I mean, writing is a very introspective and essentially, lonely thing that introverts are very well suited to doing,
Wow.
for sure.
And are you an only child?
No, I'm the oldest of five. And our family dynamics are, I would say, extremely fraught and complicated. And that's weird because I had what you'd have to call an extremely, quote unquote, normal upbringing. There was no exceptional trauma in our family home life, and yet all five of us are about as so we're combative and can be at odds with each other, and it's just a weird thing. And I've thought a lot about what did my parents have to do with that. They created a home atmosphere that was founded on love, but so how did all this sort of anger and combativeness find its way into our house? It's quite a mystery.
Amongst the siblings.
Definitely.
As children and adults?
Yeah, well, yes. As children, my sister and I, I'm number one. She's number two. We literally fought. I mean, physically fought with pulling hair and scratching and punching. And my other siblings, the little ones, would gather around and watch. And so we were very physical. We were very physical.
Wow.
And I just can't figure that out. And you might say to yourself, well, sure, in a household where maybe there really was, if there was emotional battering or there was some other trauma or something was unstable, none of that was true. My father was a very rock steady provider. He and my mom had a strong marriage. My mom was a full-time homemaker. We lived in very nice suburbs. And yet there was like this inner turmoil.
Right. And is it still there today, between you and your sister?
Somewhat. There are shifting alliances among the siblings, but I would say that it's not easy.
Right.
It's not easy going.
Depending on which way the wind's blowing that day or that moment.
Right.
So
right.
One of your mom's attributes that you are fond of or admire?
My mother was superb in everything that she attempted to do. And one of the things that she was extraordinary at was cooking. She made it her mission, since she knew she was not going to work outside of the house, to keep an immaculately clean house, despite caring for 5 children and a husband. And she was just an astonishingly good cook. She could not make a bad meal, and she made it always seem effortless. And she was just really, really good at it. And this is one of the things that I decided early on that I did not want to do. And to this day, fortunately, I married a man who loves to cook, because I just decided it wasn't where I wanted to put my own time and energy, although I do respect and admire. It was something she was incredibly good at. I mean, she always made whatever you had that she made, it was the best that you tasted anywhere. Really amazing.
Did you have friends come and eat dinners with you? Was your household something to that effect?
Yes. I definitely
they would always want to come
over
and eat your mom's food.
Yes. Everybody wanted my mom's cooking. And when they did have dinner parties, which they did do on occasion, most, I think, to entertain some of my dad's maybe business friends or some other friends, there was no one who felt they could hold a candle to my mother's cooking. I mean, even basic things like she made, to this day, I can remember the taste of her fried chicken and her potato salad, and just sort of even foods that you think of as basic. They were just unbelievably good. She just did something that made it just really good.
Oh, I wish I could have gone and hung out with her. I mean, my mom was an amazing cook too, but just listening to these stories, it makes my mouth water. It's so much fun because food was such a big part of our upbringing. Was she a perfectionist?
Yes. So this gets to the key of some things that I've been spending a lot of my time trying to figure out. Not a lot of my time, but I mean, in the background, trying to figure out things going on in the family dynamics. And I would say that my mother was a perfectionist, and I think that she really actually was plagued by chronic anxiety, and which combined with sort of a lack of self-confidence. And so it was very important to her to do everything extremely well, and to to run an extremely orderly household. So there were a lot of rules. And one of the rules that it's easy to laugh at now as kids, my mother would say, the kitchen is closed. She would decide that there were hours where the kitchen was closed. You were not allowed to go into the kitchen to so much as get a glass of water. The kitchen was closed.
Wow.
Because she couldn't abide a crumb on the floor. And so if you put your hand in the cookie jar and a crumb fell, she would want to clean that up. And she was trying to give herself a break.
Yeah. Because otherwise she'd have to be in there cleaning it up.
That's right.
So like a type A personality? Or
in her sphere, I think it's fair to say that in her sphere she had a type A personality, but her sphere really was very traditional hearth and home, with the exception of some volunteer activities that she took on at a few points in her life. It mostly was very domestically focused.
Did your mom go to school or any higher education?
Yeah, she went to 1 year of college and dropped out. She really wanted to go. You have to understand, my mother was born in 1933, so she was college age in 1950-ish, 50, 51. She really wanted to go to, I think it was Antioch. And even at the time, Antioch in Ohio was this hotbed of free thinking radicalism. And my mom wanted to go have that experience. And her parents were like, absolutely not. So she ended up going 1 year to Colby College in Maine, which was the absolute opposite of everything that Antioch was, and left after a year and married my dad. And that was like at the ripe old age of 18 or whatever. Yeah.
Wow, that one little thing. Too bad she didn't insist and put her foot down and walk out the door. I'm going to Antioch.
That's right. But she grew up in an era where
life. You didn't do that.
Yes. Right? Yes, but you obeyed your parents. It wasn't an option not to obey your parents. And she didn't have a strong enough ego to be defiant. And she would have had such a different life, because I know she wanted to write early on. And she just, there was a point where I think we discovered scraps of pages that she'd shoved into drawers that she tried to write short stories, and she didn't have the confidence in herself to try and make that leap. It's so hard to do because it is a leap of faith, and she couldn't put it into herself to do it.
Especially when you don't finish school, then all of a sudden you have a family of, 5 children at home. Your husband's working, so you're the homemaker. In that era, to say, I'm going to do this because this is what I want to do, that would definitely require some strength and some, belief in yourself and a spine, perhaps, for lack of a better word, right? To think of herself like, I'm taking this for myself. That would have been great.
That's right. And she was self-effacing, and I knew her parents very well. I knew all my grandparents. It was a situation where I had all 4 grandparents till I was well into my own 20s, so I really did know them. So I had that rare opportunity to witness some of my own parents' family dynamic with their biological families. And although I wasn't able to process a lot of it at the time, because when you're young, you don't really pick up on all that stuff. Looking back, it was easy to see that, my mother's mother was, very meek and mild, and whatever her strong thoughts and opinions were, she kept a lot of them to herself. And so I think my mom, she did have opinions, but I don't think she shared them all.
Yeah, wouldn't it be great to have a conversation with her now to find out what she was really thinking with every mom, right?
Yeah.
Whether 20 or 60 or 80,
That's right.
That would be pretty great. So did you have, what's the age difference between you and your sister? Did you have any time with your mom before your sister was born?
Here's the best way to put it. My mother had 5 children in 7.5 years.
The answer is no, then.
Yeah. By the time my mother was 23, she had 5 kids.
Wow. There's something to be said for that.
Yeah. And she only had 1 functioning fallopian tube. And the doctor said, you might not be able to conceive. And that turned out not to be a problem.
Yeah, we've heard that before. So were you in charge of taking care of the kids because you were the oldest? You took on that role or not so much?
I did at times, particularly because we were 4 girls and then a boy, and I was very protective of my baby brother. But I'll tell you, Jackie, given that I don't have terrific relationships with all of my siblings now, I look back and it's hard for me to remember that caretaking role. But I think I did do it to some extent. And I think I was expected to. But my brother, most of all, because he was the baby.
Yes, the baby brother. So as I mentioned earlier, we talked about your mom not taking chances. What else comes to mind where you think that she had maybe one foot in the door wanting to do something?
She always said, every time she was asked, I love being a wife and mother. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. I never wanted to do anything else. So I think that very early on, she put away those other, what you might think of as intellectual hopes and dreams, and just figured out that was not for her. And I think she made her peace with that. But I also think that she had a lot of undirected frustration. Undirected not really being a word, but what I mean is she didn't have maybe sufficient outlets, like many women of that era.
Absolutely. So what were some things that you felt you had a drive for, if you remember specific ones that you were like, man, my mom wants nothing to do with this, so I'm going to go do that? Like, did you revolt?
I was an extremely obedient, good girl who never got into any trouble, which I now look back on and I regret. I wish that I had acted out because honestly, I think I've saved my acting out for my 60s, which maybe that's a good thing, because I can do it in a controlled way. I do know that when I left the house for college, I didn't really feel like a need. I know that some people are so close to their mothers and they talk on the phone every day, and I never had that relationship with her, and I felt like I didn't need her. And I can't even tell you whether was I in denial about something, but she couldn't give me what I needed because I went out into the world and she hadn't done that. She hadn't worked outside the home really. She barely, gone to school away from home. And so I had all these experiences that she did not have. And my relationship with my own adult daughter is so different from my relationship with my mother. And a lot of that is so deliberate on my part. I didn't want that same relationship.
But how lucky are we that we had these women that are either revolutionaries or they're out there, their voices are being heard. They preceded us. They helped us get to who we are today, so it's because of her that you realized what you wanted and what you were able to do and that you wanted to change things.
Of course, you have to have that base laid down, that foundation laid down for you of feeling loved and feeling safe. And I had those things, and then you have a leaping off point. I can only imagine if you grow up with a parent or parents who are truly in emotional crisis themselves, you don't get to have that sense of yourself, and how difficult that is.
Yeah, if the adult in the room is having a really tough time handling life, how am I as an adolescent supposed to figure out what's right and wrong and what I want and don't want? And it's a very hard situation to be. And many, 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 many kids are confronted with that all the time. Did you and your mom ever have conversations about sexuality or intimacy, the personal mom-daughter sharing stories?
She really, really shied away from that. And I remember trying. I remember some things happening in junior high where some questions came up for me. and I tried to ask her, and she just couldn't have the conversation, or she wanted to shut it down as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
I think those things were really, really difficult for her. And so, one of the things that I regret might be too strong a word, because I don't want to spend energy on regrets that I don't need to have, but I never felt close to her, or that I knew her that well, or that we had that intimate a relationship. She just seemed to keep herself to herself in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I've tried to have more of an adult friendship with my own daughter, not intrusively so, but to let her see me as a true person with emotions and flaws and ups and downs and wins and losses and
human.
Yes, yeah. And my mom was a bit of a cipher, I think. It was kind of hard to get a read on her. If you say, who was she? It's very hard to give a clear answer.
Do you think at night when she was with your dad, oh my gosh, Amy came to me today and asked me all these personal questions, and they would like laugh? Do you think that they talked about stuff like that, like my husband and I do? Like the boys said such and such.
That question sort of blows my mind, because I just realized that I haven't spent any time imagining what my parents said to one another in private. You know what? I bet she didn't. I'm thinking not, she didn't. Right? I don't think so.
Oh my gosh. Like always, like what were my parents, were they howling at the seven of us and the crazy stuff that we were up to? I mean, we weren't bad kids, but we definitely, we were so respectful, but we just had fun, and they encouraged the fun, especially kids coming over to the house and big parties and stuff like that. But I always wondered, like, did they just talk about us, the kids, incessantly and just laugh? I hope they did, they worked really hard. So you are a writer. You've been a writer for many years now. You seem to be shifting over to some wonderful stories, fiction writing, and tell us a little bit about that so my listeners can find your works.
Sure. What I've realized is, just to transition from the mother conversation, is there have been times when I thought that I now have fulfilled the completely unexplored destiny that my mother might have had she had a different personality or been born in a different time. And I spent many years in the nonfiction world and journalism world and other things, government communications and all this stuff, and reached a point where I kind of had a now or never moment, and I just started writing plays and then turned to novels. I just thought, if I'm going to do it, I've got to do it, because my mom never did it. I'm going to do it. And that actually was very motivating for me.
I was going to say.
It was. Perfect. It really was. All the things she didn't live long enough to see this work. I think maybe she was aware of some of my very early stuff. But yes, so I have just published a dystopian mystery thriller that is about missing teen and the very dark forces that are behind her disappearance. And in fact, I'm very excited. I'm actually reading from that book. Well, I'm staying up in Vermont right now. I'm reading from that book in a local independent bookstore tonight. So that's very fun for me. And I also had published in June, a romance with a strong archaeology theme to it. And I had a blast researching a lot about archaeology and artifacts, which is a subject that fascinates me. So it's really been fun sending these books out to the world and finding readers.
Are you constantly realizing that your style is changing and developing, or that you're interested in different topics that you never thought you would be? Like, you just find yourself going in this path that, all of a sudden your eyes are wide open and like, this is exciting. Is it work like that as a writer, as an artist? You explore new things?
Yes. I'm cursed with being a multi-genre author, which is to say many writers today very wisely pick a lane and stick in it. So, for example, they become known for writing fantasy, or they become known for writing mysteries or horror or whatever it is, or romance. And I am skipping around and having a blast doing it, because when I find the story that I want to tell, the story to me dictates the form of the book. So I really wanted to explore this idea for a mystery, and I did that. And I really wanted to write about the archaeology stuff in the form of a kind of a paranormal romance with some kind of fantastical elements, and I did that. And I've also done some young adult work. I have another young adult book coming out, fantasy, in September. It's really for a teen market. It's a coming of age story. It's for teens who are really looking to find their place in the world. So yes, the story drives me to the form in which I choose to write it.
Do you, like many creatives, they in the middle of the night they get an idea? Is that how your brain works? Something, and you write it down? Because if you don't write it down, you forget it.
Yeah, my ideas actually come during waking hours, but sometimes I'll have an idea for a scene or a plot point at night. Unfortunately, I'm not one. Like, I wish I could say that I get these amazing brainstorms, like wake up at 2 a.m. That sounds very exciting to me. I just don't work that way.
Well, that's okay. Everyone's different, right? I'll wake up or I'll have these amazing dreams. I'm like, okay, I'm going to remember that. Or even an intro to an interview or something. Okay, I'm going to remember that. And then poof. I was like, that was, or the title of it for a show, and I should always write it down. But it's just so fascinating how our brains work.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
All right. So you also, and I love this, that you help out with kids and adults. You take part in programs to help your community, and I applaud you for that. That's really great in Baltimore.
Yes, thank you. It's a little bit random, but before the pandemic, I was doing a lot of training in how to write grants, because I've written a number, and I've done a fair amount of training of how to get grants. And I always try and talk to very grassroots communities, which is a lot of folks who are trying to learn how to submit a grant for the very first time, because I really believe in building these bridges between folks who don't have access to the resources and certain specialized knowledge, but really have tremendous projects and work that they want to do in their communities. And so I'd like to help people have those tools, that knowledge, and those resources. But I also work with I do a lot of grant writing training, or have, for the arts communities, because there are a lot of artists and small nonprofits who also struggle to figure out how to get the funds that they need and deserve for their work. So that's a bit of what I do. I also have done a number of various kinds of teen writing workshops and helping with judging contests for young writers. And that's extraordinary when you see the work that young folks are capable of. It's just so gratifying.
Yeah, they just need that one hand to hold sometimes, right?
Right.
To encourage them. Well, thank you for doing that. Amy L. Bernstein, what's the best way for people to find you?
Just go to my website, which is Amy Writes. It's AMYWRITES, amywrites.live.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Amy, on Should Have Listened to My Mother.
Thank you, Jackie. I really enjoyed the conversation.
And thank you for sharing stories of Gloria. We will be back next week with another episode of Should Have Listened to My Mother. Thanks so much for listening.